Hey guys, just a reminder before we start the videos to like and subscribe so we can keep providing these great videos for you.
And then, of course, the famous William Eugene incident, when I made up a dummy website, a dummy person called William Eugene, which was my father's first and middle name.
So
and we went back, and then William Eugene started doing, because I used to do all the race announcements and everything, for the SCRA and for D3.
Yeah.
Well, we told Philippe. Now Philippe Mill's going to go in under an assumed name.
Okay.
William Eugene's going to be a slot racer from Newport Beach.
Okay, the whole persona.
Here's the background persona on him and everything. He's a newbie, but he's going to go back now to do the race announcements for Brian and everything like that while Brian does the race reports. And William Eugene will announce all the races and everything, but he really won't do much posting other than that. We told Philippe. Well, you tell Philippe one thing, and what's the first thing Philippe turns around and does? After William Eugene had posted for a few months, Philippe, and on Slotblog, it would say where you were from, right?
Yeah.
William Eugene from Newport Beach.
Beach.
He's a newbie. He hasn't raced yet, but he's doing the race announcements and everything like that. He hasn't shown up. He hasn't shown up on any race report yet or anything like that. Because, we always listed all the guys at the races and, if they qualified and whatever. And then Philippe goes, I know all the racers from Newport Beach. And I've never met William Eugene. And we'd already told Philippe, do not say anything about William Eugene. It's Mill. And Philippe went on for months going, I don't know who this guy is because he's not racing, but he's completely knowledgeable about everybody.
Very active.
And he's really reactive. It's almost like he's been it. And Philippe goes, I've never seen him at a race, but he knows everything that went on at the race. And so this went on for a few months, and finally Philippe posted on Slotblog, I think William Eugene is a made-up person. And Brian is like, we told you who he was.
I don't remember that.
Oh, God, it was funny. So then we had to, of course, simulate, and we had to have the death of William Eugene.
Oh no!
So we had to post. We had to come up with a scheme on how to bury off William Eugene's person. So we made up this elaborate thing, that William Eugene has this sudden death. And there's the death of William Eugene, and we post this large story on the Slotblog, how William Eugene dies, and we're all sad and sorrow.
There's a lot of people commenting, "Oh, he was a nice person, very good
exactly.
race."
It was hilarious. It was genius. It was genius.
Oh, God.
And then William Eugene came. We actually had a memorial race for William Eugene.
Oh no!
We had a D3 race, an SCRA race for William Eugene in his honor. And
Don't tell
Brian,
me that widow came up.
And then
The widow came in.
and then Brian painted a car, a tribute car to the death of William Eugene. And we were always announcing,
We sold his cars and everything was so sad. The widow needs the money. The whole.
Oh, it was absolutely. This was one of our finest moments. It was just really funny. William Eugene's death.
Eugene is dead.
is dead. And then he came back. He then came back as Alexander Blankenship. About 2 years later, he comes back as Alexander Blankenship. And then I had to go in and create on Google Mail a place because to join Slotblog, you had to have an email.
Yeah.
So I had to create a Google Mail account for Alexander Blankenship. By then, Wells and Swiss and Noose are all on the lookout for things. And then it's like, well, who is Alexander Blankenship? And then they but he got on for a little while. And then of course, here today and gone tomorrow, another racer. Because at one point, we decided William Eugene actually got into a race on the official race thing and everything, but his motor blew. His motor blew right before qualifying.
DNF.
So
DNF for
he
the-
DNF. But his name did make a printout sheet.
to make sure that he was there.
And it was great because William Eugene, he knew who was there, he knew what happened during the race, he made little race report comments and everything.
Communicative
racer.
and
Philippe kept going, God, I didn't see him.
Philippe.
Who saw him?
But you got along with Philippe, right?
Oh, Philippe and I are good friends.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I always got along with Philippe. And you know the story on how I came back to retro racing. One day on a Sunday, my brother and I were driving by. We were driving down Valley View in Lincoln.
Okay.
And then we turned, and I saw this sign that said Slot Car Raceway. And I said to my brother, I can't believe, are these still racing slot cars? So I pulled into the parking lot.
That was back in the 90s or early 2000s.
This was in 2000 and it was 2007, 2008, right around there. And so I pull into the parking lot and I see it's Buena Park Raceway. I have no idea what it says. So we walk in the door, and I walk inside there, and I look over at the side, and Lee Hines is in the building, and I recognize it. At that point, I hadn't seen Lee Hines in 30 years. And Lee Hines recognizes me. And over on the side was Philippe, Paul Sterrett, and Mike Stubbe. And I recognized Stubbe. And we all got to talking and everything like that. Well, then Mike Stubbe is talking to me, and Lee Hines is talking to me, and we start talking about the old days and everything like that. And Philippe's listening to all this, and we get into more serious talk about the old days and everything. And Philippe tells me that, he's a part of Electric Dreams, and he's collecting vintage stuff and everything. And he asked me, do I have any? And I said, he said, well, the Slot Car Museum has nothing of Terry Schmidt's. I go, well, Terry and I were real close friends. And back in the old days, I said, I happen to have the last 3 chassis maybe that Terry ever built. And I have Stubbe chassis and motors and Sucres. And Philippe's eyes are just lighting up. He's like,
what are we doing here? Let's go.
Noah's Ark is just pulled in.
Yeah.
And so Philippe said, look, would you be willing to donate this stuff to the museum? Because we're putting together a slot car museum. And I said, sure. And then Philippe said, well, what could I do for you if you want to donate all this? I said, look, I have, as far as I know, the last 3 that have never been raced chassis that Terry Schmidt ever built before Terry got out of it. Yep. And I said, I've got Stubbe's, I've got motors, everything. I have my original box and everything. It hasn't been looked at since I quit in 70, but I saved all this stuff. And then, so I said to Philippe, well, you know what? Now that you guys have told me you're back into racing, I said, I would really love a car. Philippe goes, how about I build you a car and I'll get you a hand control? I had no idea what this stuff was worth at the time.
Yeah.
I had no idea that there was a marketplace for this stuff and everything like that.
Well, they kind of were, 2007, Philippe and Scott, they kind of were starting the marketplace for
right.
That, right?
And
it's just like things from the 90s. Nobody cares right now, but in a couple of years, people, a wing car.
Well, one of the things that people didn't know about me at the time was, my aunt was Marilyn Monroe's manager.
I was about to ask you that.
I already had a real good idea about the memorabilia market, but I had no idea that slot cars, vintage slot car stuff at the time was worth stuff. So I said to Philippe, I said, okay, I'll bring you all this stuff. And Philippe said, I'll build you a car. I'll build you a Can-Am retro car, and get you a Professor motor hand control, which is what everybody was running at the time.
There was just starting that class, right? The retro was 2006
Yes,
and
they
7,
had
right?
they had been running for about a year at that time,
Okay.
and they had just introduced the TSR motor,
Okay.
and so Philippe builds me a custom Can-Am car. He actually built 3 of them. He built one for me, one for Rick Salvino, and one for himself. And then he got me one of the first adjustable Professor motor hand controls.
Nice.
So when that happened, I went down, and they had told me that Brian Wormack and Tori Anderson were down at the shop. So I hadn't seen Brian since probably about 69 or 70. So I went down to the shop with my slot car box.
Look who's here.
And
Mr. Sensel.
Dennis,
Dennis.
another good friend. And so I went down to the shop, and I had my original box, and Brian was restoring a bunch of cars because in the front of the shop, Brian has this huge case of vintage retro cars,
there,
and it's still there. He has a couple of these gigantic glass cases, multiple shelves. And I open my box, and Brian basically looks with his eyes, and he's like, "Oh my God, look at all the dynamic parts you have. Look at all these vintage retro parts and armatures and Arco magnets and things like that." And I said to he and Tori, I said, "Guys, take whatever you want." At this point, I still don't know that this stuff's worth anything.
Yeah.
And I said, "Please, Cox, 3-spoke knockoffs, Cox gears, threaded axles, everything to restore cars and everything." I still had my Arco thingy car at the first Arco race in '67. And I said, "Brian, help yourself to anything like that." And Brian goes, "Mil, if you will, if Tori and I can have some of these parts," he says, "I'll build you a car."
Okay. So you
And
have
I
two very good cars right now.
So I said, "Great." And he says, and he starts telling me about the retro program. And so he said, "Our first race is on the Kingleman." Well, of course, I have no idea. All I knew is it was the back track at Buena
narrow
Park,
track,
which Mike Stubbe, nicknamed the knife fight in a phone booth. So Brian builds me this custom car, and my nickname was the Spider from playing basketball at UCLA. So he builds this custom car and custom paints the body with a giant Black Widow spider on the body itself. And I show up at my first retro race with Brian in tow, and Brian and Tori are going to take me under their wing and show me the ropes and everything.
Very
and of
nice.
course, we get back on the Kingleman track. And of course, the Kingleman track is like, I've never even raced on any slot car track in 35, 36 years or so. And you go to learn your first day back with everybody from Doug Mathis and Sucrus, and everybody's on this. Stubbe's there, Sterrett, Philippe, we're all racing on the Kingleman, and I take this brand new car, and of course the Kingleman's famous for this little hairpin turn on black.
Yeah.
I beat this car to a holy pulp. I beat this car up one side and down the other, trying to learn this track for the first time.
Yeah.
They just throw me into a retro race. And Brian loans me a Formula One car, and I've got my own Can-Am car. And so I proceed to just beat the holy crap out of this car. But Brian goes, "Don't worry, we can fix it."
It's a hard
learn
track.
it. Learn the track. It's a hard track. You'll learn the track, but you couldn't have. It's like learning to surf on a 40-foot day. Don't worry, you're gonna get the hell beat out of you, but you'll come back. It's like golf. Every golfer knows you'll have one good shot during the day. The rest of them can be lousy, but it brings you back.
It's a hard track. I remember that I raced once there on the Gincana race that we did. The
Yes.
race that we raced all the tracks with the same car.
Absolutely.
And I didn't practice it there. And they say, "Oh, how hard can it be? I can do it." And I couldn't do the hairpin. I crashed like 7 times in 20 laps, I think. It's
It
impossible.
looked like Sam at the Christmas Enduro out here. Sam learned in a hurry. 132nd racing's not as easy as it
Not
looks.
as the same, yeah. Not the same. Carlos is asking me for an introduction, right? So let me do an introduction because people are going to be mad and jealous because you're here. You're here as the Christmas Enduro winner, and you're drafted to the team, and you're wearing the jacket of the team, the West Boys with Ian Douglas and Herman James.
Yes.
I have the car here. I'm gonna show the car in some. I'm gonna put some pictures online. The car is pretty nice. I still have the car here because I'm supposed to do a breakdown video show, whatever we're gonna do, and plus we're gonna copy the setup to 30 cars, a limited edition of GT40, NSR GT40s that we're going to be selling with the same setup that you guys won the race. Want to talk about that race a little bit? I wasn't here. I had COVID.
I remember.
I was at home watching and trying to help Dennis online.
You were.
Yeah, but tell me a little about the race. People say that you were lucky to get drafted by the team that won, but I think the team that won were lucky to draft you.
Well, it was really an experience because what happened was originally Phil Nyland and I had talked about running in the Enduro together.
Yes.
But Phil Nyland decided that he was going to run with Eddie Shore.
Okay.
So Dennis Sampson asked me to race with him in the Enduro. So that was the day I drove to come here for the Christmas Enduro.
We were racing with Dennis.
I was racing with Dennis.
Then I got sick.
And then we heard that you got sick. And so Dennis and I talked, and
Eddie got sick too.
And Eddie got sick as well. And Phil called me and said, "Look, Eddie doesn't have I don't have a partner now because Eddie's gone." And I thought, okay, well, how do we get Phil into the race because he really wants to race? And I said, let me talk to Dennis. I said, I'll race direct because Dennis and I are the two people most familiar with the race program because I ran all the retro races
with the track system,
with the track system, and I know I can run it in my sleep. I said, Phil, why don't you and Dennis race the Enduro together, and I'll race direct. And so that was what we were going to do that morning. But then when Dennis and I started talking here, Dennis said, Mill, it's a great plan, except for the fact I work for Electric Dreams, and somebody from Electric Dreams should really be race directing.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you go and race with Phil. And we went back and forth. And then it was finally decided Phil and I would race together. And I said, well, because in the morning, I helped Carlos clean the track. The two of us cleaned the track. I got here early, and we made sure that the whole track and everything.
Did you say thank you? Okay, I hope.
Yeah, so we got the track. It was all ready before any of the racers got here. The first thing, we made sure that everything, got handled, and we knew you were sick.
Thank you.
So I wanted to do anything I could to help out, and help with Dennis, help Carlos, whatever we needed to do. And so that's how it got started. And then, of course, you had the qualifying Enduros, the 2-hour Enduros.
Yeah, let me just explain a little bit the format for people who doesn't know. So we have 16 teams that turned out to be 15 teams because I was sick. Then is stepped it up to be the race director, and then you team up with Phil because Eddie was sick too. So we have 15 teams, and the original model was racing round robin, all the 15 teams, 20 minutes per lane, 10 minutes per driver, and then at the end of this, the 6 best teams will go for a final, a 3-hour final, drafting one of the 10 best best of the rest. So we have a list. I counted the laps individually to everyone. I took off the 12 drivers for the first 6 teams, and those guys, the 6th team will be the first one to draft one of the 10 best drivers, best of the rest. But for some reason, I wasn't here. You guys decided not to do the round robin. For me, it was kind of a mistake because it took like at least 2 hours more.
Yeah. What happened was, if we had done a round robin, they decided against it, and they thought, well, because some teams won't be on the same thing. So they said, we're going to split them up 5, 5, and 5.
Yeah.
And that's what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
And
that for me was the biggest mistake, because it ended up adding at least 2 hours. 1 hour of practical time, but 1 hour of changing people and whatever.
Of course.
Organizing. And then the race, the final started like almost 8 p.m.
Right.
And then we have to reduce the final a little bit, because people are literally laying down and trying
to... And one of the things, after all the teams had run the first 2 hours, and we got to the 6 teams that were going to and eliminated, then they said, now we're going to have the draft.
Yeah.
And they explained to everybody how the draft was going to work.
And there was a little lobby going on.
Right. And that's when I can tell the story everybody wants to tell, or I can tell the real story.
Tell me the real story.
What happened?
Tell me the real story. Give me names.
So what happened was, we all went to sit in the back, and the original thing was going to be that Dennis Sampson would call, starting with the 6th place team.
Yes.
He would talk to the 6th place team and ask who they wanted to draft
from
off
the
the
list,
drivers
from
list,
the top
from
10
the
list.
top 10 list.
Yes.
And then they would go to the back and pull one of the racers that had not made it in the 6 qualifying teams, and ask him to come into this room that we're sitting in now
to discuss
if he wanted to race with them.
Yeah, join it.
And
that's what I designed it.
And that's the way that you had designed it.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was, and what really happened was, in the back, I sat down in the back, and I was watching everybody.
And you were in the top 10 list.
Yes, I was on the top 10 list. Yeah, I was number 5.
Okay.
No, I was number...
You don't know the number, because when I sent the list, it was mixed. I didn't put the laps.
I was 3. I was 3 or 4. One of the two. I was either 3rd or 4th. Okay. But what happened was, in the back, I thought to myself, you know what's going to... The only fault that nobody had thought about at the time was the other teams. Rick Yocum's team with Walter Baines, Jim Rose's team with Bob Hooley.
Yeah.
They had already started talking to who they wanted to be on their team.
Of course, it's natural.
That was natural what happened.
Yeah.
And nobody figured the fault of the way the program was going to be is that if you were a good driver and you had friends on one of the other team, they were telling you, don't accept with another team. Wait, we're going to draft you.
The old good lobby.
It was a complete. The fix is in. And
it's supposed to be fun.
And
oh God.
And so certain people, and if you want me to name names, I can name names, but certain people already knew that the top 2 teams wanted them to drive for them.
Okay.
So
every time that somebody called him, no, thank you.
Yeah. So
I really appreciate you guys.
So after 2 people kept turning Dennis down, finally Dennis walked back. Yeah, and I was watching this all go on.
Dennis called me.
And Dennis finally, he had spoken to you, and Dennis came to the back and he said to me, he said, Mill, everybody's turned down racing with Kevin Tabucci's team. Would you race with Kevin Tabucci? And I said, absolutely. I'll race with the pizza girl next door. No problem. Yeah. I'm here for the fun of it. This has been a great event.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit I was hoping for.
This is what. And then after I agreed, Dennis went back to the front, and then somebody else said no again
for the 5th time.
And so then Dennis comes back, and finally Dennis laid down the law, and he said, we're not, because even after I had agreed, I just sat back and I watched the same top teams that were saying, now don't say yes to this team, don't say yes to this team, because we're going to draft you.
That's bad.
And so finally Dennis came and said, look, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it in reverse order. We're going to take the best driver that's available from the top 10 list, and you're going to go on team number 6. Yeah. The next best guy is going to go on team number 5, all the way.
Yeah.
And so that's how it finally ended up. And
Another problem was that because it took so long to do the semifinals, some people left.
Some people
Some from the top 10, oh, it's too late, I need to go.
And one a couple guys said, I only can be here till like 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
My wife needs me to be at home. So no matter where our team finishes, I'm not going to be able to stay anyway.
So the way that it's going to work next year, all right? We're going to start earlier. We're going to do less practicing. We're going to start earlier. We're going to do the round robin, even if I have 18 teams. It's going to be the same thing. We're going to have to draft one from the top 10 list. And we're going to have the top 10 list. And says that you finish 6th. You call Carlos. Carlos comes in and says, I don't think so. Okay, Carlos, you're out of the list.
You're done. That's
things.
Exactly. That makes
Packard
completely
things.
sense.
That's
Good
it.
sense.
Like it's probably, if people are going to sandbag, if people are going to do more lobby, that's another problem. But then the race will go on.
Correct.
If they're talking to each other, if they're paying people to send the bag and stay on the top list, that's not my problem. But the race is going to go on. That's the decision, and that's going to be it. Supposed to be the celebrational race, supposed to be the Christmas holiday, whatever.
It was fantastic.
And then people, I don't know about that. I prefer the other team. Oh, God.
So,
but the funny thing of all that you just told me is that you came to race with Dennis. You raced with Phil. We ended up in a team that you're not supposed to be drafted to, and you won the race. And here's wearing the team vest.
And that's what was funny, because from the very beginning, after I found out I was going to be racing with Herman and Ian, they were extremely happy. And
of course.
And they said, this is going to before the race even started, they said, Mill, we ran our race probably about 9/10. We knew we were going to win our 5-man group.
Yeah.
And so he said, we pretty much knew that we were going to be in the final. So we didn't really push the car at all or anything like that. We know the cars got more, because the favorites, pre-race favorites, were the team of Rick Yocum and Walter Baines and Jim Rose and Bob Hooley. Those were the top two teams that everybody thought was going to be the ones to beat.
Especially because they have super fast cars.
And because, let's face it, Walter and Rick live here. I'm surprised they didn't step over their sleeping bags when I walked in this morning.
I closed the track.
Yeah, exactly.
I closed the track for 3 days.
But they do. They spend a lot of time on the track, and God bless them. Anybody who puts in that time and effort and everything, you deserve it.
Well, but they deserve it even because they share. Of course. Everything.
Exactly.
Even if somebody shows up and needs a car, Walter is going to be the first one to offer.
They're great.
A top car. Top car.
They're absolutely great people.
And they help everybody.
They help everyone. They're very knowledgeable, and they share that knowledge.
I have no problem with that. And they're winning because they're very good. Rick is one of the best drivers I know.
They're great drivers and everything.
Have you seen the man driving?
Oh, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He's like 7-time national champion for AJO.
Exactly.
He won the national champion here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, and so when I met Ian and Herman and got assigned to their team, they said, "Oh man, this is great!" And because I've known Herman from retro racing, and I just met Ian that day.
Yeah. Okay.
But Herman and I go way back in retro together, and
Ian's also super technical and his go to the detail.
Absolutely.
He was sending me pictures of the car during the preparation because he wants to add a lip to the GT40. He wants to have this more modern look to it. So I was like, okay, you can do it. There's nothing on the rules, but you can do it. It
was brilliant, and the way the car was designed and everything, it was absolutely, and.
They're gonna be very jealous that you're here. They're not, but they live in North California. But I'm wearing the team T-shirt, Ian. So don't get jealous with me.
And that's why I wore our team shirt.
And that was pretty cool of them because everybody has some sort of swag like T-shirts and sweatshirts like that. And when I saw you with the sweatshirt of the team, they have the third one separate because they knew they have to draft someone. That was pretty cool. That was the spirit of the race.
They were so generous and so nice to me. And then, so what I did. Everybody in retro knows me. I'm the chemical guy because it's my business.
Is that a good thing? What do you mean by chemical guy? Is that legal?
I make for retro. I make tire treatments that are and oils that are used by all the top racers in the world. I provided Brad Freisner, Gugu, Chubby at the Worlds, Rich Cornute.
Marco.
Marco, everybody in retro, Duran on down, Brian Warmack, everybody uses my tire treatments, and I deliberately had made tire treatments for the 132nd cars. So I said to Herman and Ian before the race, I said, okay, now that I'm part of this team,
Here's
here's what I can add to it as well. We can use this on the tires because this will last way longer than NSR oil.
Okay.
And a lot of the racers here had asked me before the race, before the Enduro started, they said, "Hey Milt, did you bring any tire treatment?" And about 6 different guys I supplied tire treatments to because they'd all tested it. I had come a couple of weeks before, and we were out testing on the track out here. And where NSR oil would last about 4 or 5 laps, my tire treatment would last 30 or 40 laps. And it keeps the tires unbelievably
When are you
clean.
going to start to sell it?
Well, that's what I'm going to start producing now to be able to be sold.
You've been promising me for the last 3 years.
But all the guys in retro, there's not a guy in retro that hasn't.
I use in the hard bodies too.
Yeah, and we in hard body because it works on foam, it works on silicone, it works on rubber, whatever.
Urethane too.
And urethane.
But the only club that races urethane tires are far out and you're not supposed to use.
Right.
So maybe it works at urethane.
Yeah, but it's funny how guys like Eddie and those guys that race at far out ask me.
I don't know. Maybe they work.
Exactly.
We need to test.
So then it came to the Enduro, and they were first thing they offered me a third eye eclipse control, and I said they were turning the track on for 2 minutes of practice before the start of the race, and I said, "Look, guys, I can't learn a hand control." And Ian laughed, and Ian goes, "You're not going to run that rudder controller, are you?" Herman and I are starting on 60 feet of choke, to choke this car down, and then we ease it up. And I said, "Look, I can't learn a control in 2 minutes, but I feel pretty comfortable." And so I went out for the 2 minutes and I ran the car while they watched and everything, and they told me how to drive the car and everything, and then away we went.
Was there very different from the car that you raced the semifinals?
Oh yeah, this car was. We had a good car that Walter Baines had given Phil, but this car was. It was another level. This car was amazing, and once we got into the race and once I eased into it. My whole big thing was I didn't want to let the team down because I knew Ian and Herman they had already run 2 hours with this car, and now it was going to be 3 hours, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't make too many mistakes.
Yeah.
And we all joked before the race started and everything because I've raced so many flat track races in my life, and Herman goes, nobody probably knows the flat track at Buena Park better than you, Mel, and I've raced with you, and
I raced with you,
and Marco, you raced with me.
I remember those duels between end of the Enduros.
Oh, one of the great Enduros. Marco finishes on black lane, and I was on purple, and the black lane's the fastest lane on the track, and Eddie's there. He was Marco's teammate, and Eddie's yelling.
Don't I go?
and I Marco tried to pass me on the outside at the outside of the big sweeping turn, just past the lap counter twice, and came off, and then that's what ended up costing them the Enduro.
Yeah.
But it was great fun. We had great fun racing.
But I have more memories of the Enduros, the ones that we were not like leading, or maybe you were leading and it was like 4th or 5th place. It was one of the last heats. Both cars are on the last thread, and we're just like bumping each other and trying to get
exactly.
I have more fun like that.
Just great. Well, it was like the Jim Connor race that you conceived and everything like that we ran. Everybody had a great time in that race.
That class, let me explain for who's listening to that class. My idea was Buena Park had 4 tracks: the Kingman in the back, the Blue King, the flat, and the drag race. Strip. So we were supposed to race the NASCARs that we raced at the Enduro, the 4.5 NASCARs with JK bodies. So we qualify on the drag strip. We go to the Kingman, come back to the flat, and then finish at the Blue King. That was fun. That was a fun race.
It was-
Because you have
it-
to change tires. You have to add weight, take
Oh,
it
it was
out eight.
completely.
All under green lights. All under green light. No,
Absolutely.
if you-
And one of the interesting things about that race was Marco's team was in a real dogfight with Doug Jax's team.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I have good memory.
Third, it was we won the Enduro, and
We were fighting for the podium.
you were fighting for the podium. You were fighting for third place.
Yeah.
And what it came down to, you got bonus points. You got bonus laps for how high you finished on the drag strip.
Oh yeah, laps.
And
yes.
and the winner got 5, second place got 3,
Yeah.
third place got 1. And the podium was decided by the bonus laps on the drag strip
in the morning. Yeah.
in the morning, because the race after 2,600 or so laps, whatever it was, it came down to when we added the totals, then we added back the bonus laps from the drag strip, and Doug Jax's team got the podium for third by 2 laps because of the bonus points they got
from
the drag strip.
I remember winning from Brian Warmark at drag race. The only one that I participated in my life. It was Brian on my side. I just got him. That was it. I have a picture of me going there. But that race, they got it from me because you're supposed to share your driving. And I don't remember who was the third driver for Doug's team. But at the 2 last heats, they're supposed to have that driver who was a little weaker than everybody else.
Yes.
And we were going to take it. But then Doug, who was the best driver at that team, he took over and he drove like 4 or 5 lanes.
Exactly.
And that
wasn't the spirit of the race.
Yeah, and then I was the guy who organized. I didn't want to say anything, but yeah, I suppose have a big podium on that one. But it was a cool race. We should do more. I don't know how's the administration for Buena Park right now.
Well, that's why I did the Sucres Memorial Race for John, and I ran the race because we had at that point we were going to run all 3 tracks again. But the Kingelman was in such bad shape with the braid being so bad and the track being so torn up that we ended up running it on two tracks, the flat track and
with the same car.
With the same car and the King track. Yeah. So we did it as a memorial, and we donated all the profits of the race to John Sucres's widow, Lorraine. So we wanted
any news about John's collections?
No, it's still all at John's house, and
okay, at least it's protected.
Yeah, I think Nesta is going to go through it before he leaves to go to Portugal.
Yeah. I remember the last car that John raced was a car that I built for him. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I was in work for Scott, and then I asked Scott to do some research in the museum, and he found out a body, and then I sent to Mr. Walrus in Portland, I believe.
Yeah, Jarius Watson.
Yes.
Yes.
To paint the body, so he made like a replica of that body.
Yes.
And I built a chassis because on the year before I won the Checkpoint Cup, so it was a copy of my car. And Jim Gonsalves gave us one of the brand new motor stickers that says Sucres. So I put it in the chassis. It was kind of nice. And I remember that he wanted to give me one of his heat sinks.
Yes.
That says John the Jet.
Yes.
Sucres on the other side. And I'm so polite. I said, no, thank you very much. Don't need you. Keep it. It's yours, your history. If you guys ever went to that collection, I will pay whatever you want. I want to have that thing.
We already know to look for it for you.
That thing was just like, I was so polite. I said, no, John, don't need to. Keep it. You use it. It's fine. I know that you used this since from the 60s. Can you imagine how many races in history that heat sink has on its back?
Oh, I know, because I have John's original Hootie wrench in my box that he's engraved the side of it, John the Jet Sucres, on it. So, it's stuff like that means a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of
because we've lost so many racers over the years. People like John and people like Pete Zimmerman and Paul Sterrett and several other racers.
I remember when Debbie was running Buena Park Raceway, they have a bunch of Paul Sterrett cars in the back.
Yes.
And maybe we should see where are those, because those are very precious too. And I remember seeing a shoebox full of those cars, and everything was kind of signed by Sterrett. So what are we going to do? Just leave it there.
Well, and also on the back walls at Buena Park are the original pictures that were taken of like the jail door cars and various retro cars that are still up on the wall there that were they had originally decided to take pictures of retro cars so they'd have something to put on the walls back on the Kingleman track, and those pictures are still up there.
Good, because I don't know very well the new owner, and I don't know if he participated on all that, but I think Buena Park is kind of a historic site for us.
Oh, absolutely.
Should be preserved.
Absolutely. And the new owner, Robert Range, is just the nicest guy in the world.
Very nice.
For a lot of people that didn't like Jim Watterson, who bought the place from Lenore and Chris, you either liked Jim or you didn't. There was no middle ground, and a lot of people stayed away from Buena Park years on, and now we have a new owner in Robert Range, who's just a sweetheart of a guy, the nicest guy in the world, and he's making upgrades. And one of the biggest things is for 2023, they expect to get a grandstand Engelman at Buena Park. So they'll be moving either the Kingleman out and rearranging the store, but there's going to be a grandstand Engelman.
But the Blue King is going to stay, right?
Yes, and the flat track will stay.
That's another discussion that I want to have with you, because the checkpoint got moved, and there's nobody kind of holding at Buena Park. It kind of moved just because we got a brand new facility, which is the nicest place ever, the Peruvian Raceway. But the race moved without consulting anybody. It was just because the majority of the main racers were going there. And then we kind of...
The race moved for one big reason, was that there were several racers that said they'd never come back to Buena Park. And we didn't want to split the group up. So it kind of forced Brian's hand in that we can either have a small checkpoint cup at Buena Park or a bigger checkpoint cup at Piranha. Yeah. And Piranha was the shiny new trophy. Yeah. One of the world's fastest king tracks with unbelievable, without a doubt, the number one power in the world is at Piranha Raceway. Each lane has 2 power supplies on it, one for wing cars and one for retro cars. So we moved over there, and then honestly, there were 3 or 4 racers that said they would never come back to Buena Park because of Jim Watterson. Yeah. And that became an issue, and that's how the Checkpoint Cup got moved. And originally, John Sucrus wanted to move the Checkpoint Cup, and John died.
Yeah,
that's just never getting to see Piranha Raceway. But he heard there was a new King track, and John and Jim Watterson didn't get along. So John was all, we should move it.
Yeah. It was a lot of things going on at the same time. Those 3 or 4 racers that didn't want to come, COVID, John passing, new raceway, and went there. But I think went there in the wrong way. And we should preserve the prestige. I'm not saying that I'm not supposed to move. I just say that the move was so suddenly.
Yes.
And we're not preserving what is important on that cup, which is the historical, how can I say that? The legend behind it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's lost some of its luster because of that. Yeah. And whereas we had a lot of racers coming from Tokyo with Haruki's Retro Tokyo group, we had people coming from the East Coast with Mike Isles, Matt Bruce, Jay Kissling, and all of those guys coming.
There's a Brazilian who won once.
Yes, and then there's a Brazilian guy sitting across from me that won once that got the motor that day, and then we watched him almost throw the race away on red.
The race away on red.
We just kept saying,
Marco, got it.
He still got it, but one more off and he'd have been done, because this guy proceeded to.
Alex was behind me all the time.
This happened once before, where Pete Zimmerman had the Checkpoint Cup won. He had it won. Closed. He went to red in the last heat, and he threw the race away when he had a 3-lap lead over Gorski and Mike Stubbe. And all Pete had to do was bring it home. He had the number 1 car that day, everything, and we watched Pete throw it in the dumpster.
In my defense, the bearings that I was using was just shitty bearings, and they have so much room in the back. So it was so loose in the back that my car was just I couldn't stop the car. My defense, but still. But it was the first time that I was racing with you guys.
Exactly. So it was a great time, and we had great times at Buena Park. And Buena Park The biggest difference between Buena Park and Piranha for me is Buena Park has a drop ceiling. And people don't realize one wing car going around the track at Piranha is a noise fest.
Yes.
When you get multiple cars on the Piranha King track, you can't hear yourself think. It is an echo chamber there. Yeah. Where at Buena Park, they can be holding a 50-man drag race at the same time, and you can easily hear the monitor and everything. So it makes a big difference.
Maybe that's the improvement that they need.
We've mentioned it a lot of times. Yeah. But Piranha Raceway was developed as a raceway for wing car racing, to bring wing car racing back to Southern California. Okay. Richard Cornute, who's a world-class wing racer, he wanted to build a raceway that he could basically bring wing racing back. And, he had Gary Girding come out and install the tracks, both the flat track and the King track. He extended the
Was it the same time that he installed ours?
Yes, when Girding brought the yellow track here to Electric Dreams, it was the same time.
Yeah, we brought them at the same time. And he worked here, and then he went there. I drove him in the van to Piraeus. For the first time that I was in Piraeus, was driving Gary Girding there. Yeah, it was kind of like almost 3 years ago. No, 2 years and a half ago.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. Can you tell me a little bit more about Marilyn Monroe?
Sure.
The whole thing.
What would you like to know?
So, your aunt was the manager.
My aunt was her business manager, Inez Melson.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you kept the whole catalog, the whole memorabilia thing.
What happened was the night Marilyn died, my aunt and Gladys Baker, her half sister.
That was 66, right?
That was 1962.
62. Okay.
August 5th. The night Marilyn dies, my aunt is called to the house, and Dr. Greenson was called. Gladys was there, and my aunt went into the bedroom and saw all these pills on the nightstand. Mm-hmm. So my aunt, wanting to protect Marilyn's reputation, my aunt didn't want the public to know that she was taking sleeping pills and everything. So my aunt swept all the pills off the nightstand and put them in her purse. And so the nightstand was basically vacant. Then they went, and my aunt and Gladys started throwing away personal files of Marilyn's that night. There was a lot of rumors going around about people in the mafia, people in the government, and everything, because Marilyn knew secrets that John F. Kennedy had told her, and because Marilyn had been sleeping with John Kennedy and John's brother Bobby Kennedy.
Oh God!
And so my aunt sweeps the pills off the nightstand that night. The next morning, when the police get there, and this is the middle of the night, all pills are back on the nightstand. Now, my aunt's disposed of them. So when people say, well, was the government involved? Well, let's put it this way. The pills had been gone and the nightstand swept clean, and yet the next day when the press gets there, there's all kinds of pill bottles and things like that back on the nightstand. It was a complete cover-up.
You're going dark, Mil. I was just asking about the memorabilia. You're going very dark.
So what happened? Okay. So what happened was, then my aunt, who was the executrix of the estate.
Okay.
My aunt was the appointed. My aunt was Marilyn Monroe's mother's caretaker.
Okay.
At the time, and so my aunt is the executrix of the estate, and she starts assembling everything that may be out and about that the estate
might produce.
Might produce. She went to my mom. My mom and Marilyn were very good friends. Yeah. My mom had some of Marilyn's dresses that Marilyn had loaned her. My mom had a dress that Marilyn wore on the cover of Time magazine, a green sequin dress. And my mom wore it to a New Year's Eve party. And my mom and Marilyn were very good friends. and Marilyn had dinner at my home several times, because Marilyn was married at one time to Joe DiMaggio, and my Aunt Inez, she was one of the ones that helped introduce Marilyn to Joe, and Marilyn and Joe used to meet up at my aunt's house in the Hollywood Hills in Horseshoe Canyon, unbeknownst to anyone. And one of the big things that people speculated and everything, that Marilyn died on August 5th, 1962. The following Saturday, she and Joe were going to remarry.
Ooh.
Which was not known to very many people.
Okay.
But my aunt knew about it. And so my aunt gathered all this memorabilia, and then the estate took what they wanted, because in her will, Marilyn left the bulk of her estate to her acting coach, Lee Strasberg. And there was a lot of controversy going around because, a lot of people, when it came out that Marilyn was on sleeping pills and various other pills, they blamed her psychiatrist, and they blamed that Lee Strasberg was kind of a Svengali to her, that he had her under some kind of a control
medication,
and that Greenson was in on it because he was a friend of Lee Strasberg's. And so the memorabilia that was left with my aunt was the stuff the estate didn't want, because back in those days, Hollywood memorabilia was worth nothing in the 60s.
Yeah.
It was basically worthless. I mean, the MGM studios had a big fire sale and where they sold off props from Ben-Hur and other famous movies that went, for pennies on the dollar in those days. They were it was worth nothing. Yeah. But so my aunt had a lot of memorabilia.
Actually, the memorabilia thing kind of started with the TV shows, the reality shows with Pawn Stars and stuff like that.
Yes.
Because I remember before Pawn Stars, I went to a fire sale from Warner Brothers, like a garage sale from Warner Brothers.
Right.
I have at my home right now Charles Pollock chair used in 2.5 Men, and I have like the Warner Brothers, the barcode and everything. So kind of started in 2010, 11 with the Pawn Stars things.
Well, and so what happened was, when my aunt died, she left me all this memorabilia, of which then a couple authors wrote books and mentioned the stuff
about
I had.
the collection that you have.
About the collection, and also
how many items are those?
Oh, hundreds. Oof. And hundreds. Well, then what happened was, I went to have an auction with Odyssey Auctions, and I was going to auction some of this memorabilia.
When was that?
This was, I would guess about mid-90s.
So you hold that for 30 years.
So I had held this stuff for years and years and years, and Bill Miller, who ran the Odyssey Auction House, was going to auction it. Well, when we went to bring these materials to auction, the estate of Marilyn Monroe came after me. And when they did, they came after me with the biggest law firm in the United States, Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. And they proceeded to sue me.
Okay.
Well, we went to court. They won the bulk of the items, and I won some of the items. Then later on, I decided years later that I was going to write a book with all this memorabilia that I still had. Well, then the estate tried to come after me again, and it was basically, settled law as far as I was concerned. So we were going to publish a book, and we had done a lot. I had a photographer, everything. Well, what happened was, then the estate came to me and said, "Look, we want to form a partnership with you.
Okay.
We don't want. We'll let you publish the book. We don't want the memorabilia to go anywhere."
Okay, makes sense.
If you'll become our partners, we'll share in this.
Makes
which
sense.
I did. Which I did. And they appointed They actually appointed an attorney for me that the estate paid for. The head of the California Women's Bar Association, Gretchen Nelson, became my attorney.
They're probably trying to preserve the history, trying to
Yes.
make a museum later on.
Yes. Then the estate and I formed the Marilyn Monroe LLC Corporation together. And some of the things that I still have was, as an example, I had the diamond that Marilyn gave to my aunt for being her manager all these years.
Very nice.
And at one time, my aunt was not only Marilyn's manager, she was Joe DiMaggio's manager. And that's how their connection became up at my aunt's house. My aunt had a back bedroom that was Joe's and Marilyn's bedroom.
Okay.
Because they actually met there when Marilyn was estranged from her husband, Arthur Miller, the famous playwright. So I knew a lot of history with Marilyn. I used to play marbles on the floor with Marilyn. I used to play baseball at Marilyn's house. We'd play catch in the backyard. I still have the RC Cola cooler that she used to keep soda in for when I'd come over.
Very nice.
So, we knew her quite well, and she and my mom were very, very close friends.
Do you think there's any relation with your involvement with cosmetics now? Because you produce cosmetics, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've invented a lot of cosmetics. And no, it really never got that way. I went into cosmetics by accident. I was approached by some people, my former partner in a company I founded with them in Bodyography Cosmetics. My former partner was the vice president of Marriott, Ira Schechter, and his wife, who was a consultant for Nordstrom. And Nordstrom wanted their own private label cosmetic line because Nordstrom had a vision that people that were middle class or lower weren't coming into Nordstrom to buy cosmetics because they couldn't afford the Estee Lauder brands and the Bobbi Browns and the MAC brands. So they needed an entry level line, and they came to us to develop it, and so we did, and we came out. It was called SANE, Simple and Naturally Essentials, and so we created the Nordstrom's line, which is the first private label line that Nordstrom ever had. And then, of course, Nordstrom bought brands like Joseph Abboud and things, and that started Nordstrom on this acquisition of private label stuff being done. Fashionable is another clothing line that Nordstrom then bought. So that's how I got into the business. And then we created a line for the beauty industry called Bodyography Cosmetics, and that's how I got started in it. And we became the largest cosmetic line in the salon industry.
Okay. If it wasn't the night of the August 5th, 1962, you would have a very nice spokesperson for you right now.
Yeah, she was amazing. And as I said, we used to play a game called Blockhead where you put all these building blocks up. It's kind of like Jenga. And then you pull them off, and whoever knocks off the last one, is the loser. But I used to see Marilyn and Joe all the time. And as a matter of fact, the jewelry that we have in the estate was in Joe DiMaggio's alligator leather
suitcase.
It was a briefcase. An alligator leather briefcase, and the combination was his playing number 5. So the combination was 555. And when we opened this thing up, it was in a giant trunk that's still at my home. It was in a giant, like a steamer trunk, and inside the trunk was the leather briefcase, and inside this, of course, we opened it up, and here's Marilyn's jewelry.
Jeez.
Still in there. Also in the steamer trunk was a JAL, Japanese Airlines bag, with a camera, with undeveloped Marilyn Monroe pictures when Joe went over when she was doing a performance for the troops in Japan.
Yeah, I think there's footage of that, right?
And Joe had a Zenith transistor radio in there and everything.
Did you ever develop the pictures?
Yes, we did. It's at the estate.
How many pictures do you have though?
I think there were 16.
That's nice.
So
Taken by her, maybe.
it was taken by Joe of her.
Oh, her. Okay.
So it was quite interesting.
Very nice.
And so over the years, the estate and I have preserved the collection. And
Is there any plans to make a museum or?
No, because there've been other collectors that had a lot of items, but they didn't have what I would consider the choice items. Some of the things that we had, I mean, there've been all kinds of books written about what I have and things. Vanity Fair did an article.
Yes,
So
I saw that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things, and the knowledge that I have and stuff that I haven't passed on to people. But people that know me, my good friends, know some of the stories that I've told them over the years, and of course, my aunt had her own thoughts on how Marilyn really died, and Thomas Noguchi, the famous Los Angeles coroner, completely screwed up the autopsy of Marilyn Monroe. He screwed up some other well-known celebrities, their autopsies as well. But Thomas Noguchi completely missed what killed Marilyn Monroe.
Well, I can only imagine the quality of sleeping pills back in the 60s. Which would be like the hardcore drugs ever.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine? No control, just...
Yeah, multiple prescriptions and things. Because she was taking pills to wake up in the morning. She was taking pills at night to go to sleep and everything like that. She was under a lot of stress and strain.
But that time, were you living in the Hollywood Hills or?
No, I was living in Downey.
Downey, but your
my
aunt was in Hollywood.
But my aunt was in the Hollywood Hills in Horseshoe Canyon. Her neighbor above her was Steve McQueen.
Do you have anything from Steve McQueen?
I don't, but Steve McQueen has a load of buckshot that my Uncle Pat shot at him when McQueen was up. He was dirt bike riding in the Hollywood Hills, and he'd get up there on Sunday mornings. And finally, my Uncle Pat, he shot him with rock salt out of a shotgun. But we had Alice Cooper that lived down the street. Yeah. We had one of the members of Three Dog Night that lived down the street, because this Horseshoe Canyon's a one lane road, and Alice Cooper used to put this little bench out in front of it. So he made this one lane road even smaller with this bench, and my uncle would get all over Alice Cooper.
Were your uncle involved with entertainment too, or?
Well, my aunt had a guest house on her property where she had a real well-known songwriter that was living there, and then later on the guest house kind of became a storage for a lot of the Marilyn Monroe memorabilia that was left over. And of course, one of the things that was famous and written about 1,000,000 times were the 2 file cabinets that contained all kinds of documents and everything that I had. And so when Anthony's book came out, he came to my house to view the famous file cabinets, and that's what really got the estate involved, because these file cabinets supposedly did not exist.
Okay.
Well, and it was a lock file cabinet, actually a file cabinet that Frank Sinatra had purchased for Marilyn. And this file cabinet had a locking bar, an up and down bar with a padlock on it, as well as locking drawers. And in those file cabinets there were contracts from Fox. There was all kinds of personal letters.
Okay.
I still have personal letters that Marilyn wrote to my aunt and to my father. All that kind of stuff were in the locked file cabinets that everybody said never existed. Well, of course, then when I exposed them to the world, everybody took a look at them, and they were like, "Oh my God, this did exist. This isn't phantom. This is real.
Here, right here, yeah.
Here it is."
Yeah.
And that became part of the estate's collection now.
Let me come back a little bit for slot car racing.
Sure.
But thank you very much for sharing. That's something that I always knew since I know you. I think somebody made a comment somewhere, maybe in the lunch, but I never kind of have the time to talk about it. It's fascinating that you have this knowledge and a Hollywood icon. Must be the craziest time to live in the 60s in Hollywood, the most glamorous time of cinema.
In my living room, the coffee table the last coffee table Marilyn ever purchased. It
there.
was delivered on the Saturday. She had gone to a shopping trip in Mexico, and bought new furniture for the house for her and Joe, and it was delivered
Before she passed.
right after she died, and that coffee table sits in my living room now to this day.
You probably have the receipt with her name.
Oh, I have everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's besides that auction. Did you ever try to sell something on this?
No. Like there was a very famous artist named Peter Bollard that painted two paintings, one of Marilyn laying on a bed and another of a Joker, a court jester. And those two paintings, they've hung in my parents' house for the last 45, 50 years. Yeah. And the coffee table has sat in our living room since 63.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Mil, thank you very much.
Sure.
Ian and Herman, don't get jealous. I will call you here. You guys are the Christmas Enduro winners. But Mil is here. Mil was close. I always want to talk to Mil. Mil is a legendary racer. Probably one of the top 5 drivers I know, and I can tell you that because I raced against you several times. It's pretty hard. And I do believe that Ian and Herman did a terrific job winning this, but they got very lucky to have you. They were much luckier than you having joined their team than they having you. So.
Well, it was just a pleasure to race with Ian and Herman, and we took it in great spirit. The race was fantastic. Electric Dreams that day was just.
I hope
great.
to see you at the Nationals this year. I don't know what happened. I don't want to open that can of worms, but next year I want to see you here. It's going to be much more organized. Rules are being written. Everything's going to be clear. I want to see you here.
Well, the most important thing people need to learn and understand is Electric Dreams is a unique place. Electric Dreams is the mecca of 132nd racing, and the collection of cars and parts and everything are unequaled in this industry, and that's what really keeps 132nd racing alive for all of us.
I've been traveling a lot to bring new stuff.
Absolutely. Without your efforts, your efforts are what brought Electric Dreams into a completely new level.
It's backed up by a very active owner. I bothered that guy like 25 times a day. We have a great front desk. We have people helping in the back. So it's an effort to bring back. We know that the slot cars were very popular in the 60s and the 70s. You kind of stopped in the 70s.
Correct.
And I don't believe that it was so popular as it is right now, with the many manufacturers, many models, many new cars, many things going on than was right back in the 60s. I think we're coming back to what we have in the 60s, and we're here to help.
And the big thing is, in Scott Bader, you have an owner that is just par excellence, has a museum of vintage stuff that is bar none. It's the seventh wonder of the world, and a guy who just continually looks for anything and everything, and without Scott and yourself, as I said, when you came along, and Dennis Sampson and everything, Electric Dreams turned a corner. Electric Dreams then became basically the place that if you were going to be in the 132nd hobby, you need to know about this place.
Oh yeah. Mil, thank you very much once again. All right.
Oh, real pleasure. Thank you.